Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to Bhagavad-gita Satsang, our weekly class on the yoga philosophy of the Bhagavad-gita. I'm Hari-kirtana, and it's a pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me. It's always very nice to see you. Thank you all very much for choosing to spend a little time with me this evening or whenever you happen to be watching this. And for those of you who are watching this now, if you would be kind enough to raise your hand if you can hear the words coming out of my mouth and into the microphone, thank you very much. It's very nice to know I've been heard. I trust that the sound quality is acceptable, and let's take care of our other business. Once again, for those of you who are new to the satsang, you can adjust your audio and viewing options up in the upper right-hand corner. You need not worry about your microphone or video camera because you can see and hear me, but I cannot see or hear you. If you want to make yourself heard, then there's a Q&A box, and you can type your questions or comments into the Q&A box. I will keep my eye on it for the duration of our class. And that takes care of our housekeeping. Last week in chapter 9, the Yoga of Royal Secrets, we spoke about 3 different ways to fall short of the pure devotional service that is the real subject matter of this chapter. Krishna describes those who are counted amongst his devotees, but who are not quite at the level of pure devotional service. And then he gave a description of how he is present in all of the various aspects of devotion for those who are engaged with him in ways that are not exactly pure devotion. We're going to go into some detail once again, just to review and contextualize what we're going to do this evening insofar as verses 15 through 19 are concerned. Moving forward, for tonight's class, we will look at results of worshiping demigods, and the whole idea of demigods relative to Western conceptions of worship, of mythology, etc. We'll also take a look at Krishna's idea or proposition of many paths, many destinations, as opposed to many paths all leading to one destination. We will take a look at how Krishna describes the results of demigod worship as opposed to devotion to himself. So we will cover verses 20 through 25. But before we do, as is our usual practice, we will chant the invocation mantra. Quick note about the diacritical marks. The dot over the M indicates that one presses the back of one's tongue up against the soft palate in the back of the roof of one's mouth, at the same time bringing the lips together in front. The bars over a vowel indicate a long and open kind of sound as opposed to a short sound. And the distinction between those two, I hope, will be self-evident as we chant. I chant, you chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Indicating the absolute reality, I offer my respects to the Supreme Person who is full in all opulences and is the all-pervading transcendence. All right, so let's go back to the days of yesteryear, or at least to the days of last week, and take a quick look at the concepts that we covered. The first, jnana-yogis, So knowledge by means of sacrifice, or the performance of sacrifice for the attainment of knowledge, basically the practices of jnana-yogis, or yogis who seek to understand the absolute truth through knowledge, the practices of study of the Vedas, Vedic literature, transcendental knowledge, and meditation and renunciation. The first of the three ideas or concepts generally embraced by jnana-yogis is the conception of oneness, Brahman. That is to say, the idea that there is only an undifferentiated unity that can truly be said to be reality, and everything else is an illusory superimposition, doesn't really exist, and you and I are actually Brahman, but the whole idea of a you and I is illusion. Therefore, all efforts at meditation and yoga are meant to come to the realization of this absolute unity. In a sense, one is worshiping oneself as the supreme, or a conception of oneself beyond our temporary identity composed of the qualities of material nature. The second conception is a conception of unity in diversity, or symbolism, the idea that everything can be God. Now, we'll go into some detail about this conception in tonight's verses. The idea of demigods, or varieties of gods. And in this conception, what we're talking about is the idea that any conception of a supreme being is the supreme being, or might as well be. It puts a face on that which is faceless, a name to that which is nameless, a form to that which is formless. So the idea that you can worship any form of God, or make up your own form if you so desire, and it's all the same. One kind of worship is just as good as any other kind of worship. It's a very popular kind of postmodern, what's true for you is true for you, and what's true for me is true for me, and it's all equally true somehow. And then finally, the conception of the universe itself as God, a kind of impersonal person. We speak often of how the universe is cooperating with us, or the universe loves us, or the universe is not cooperating with us, or how do we get the universe to cooperate with us? We instinctively project the idea of being a person on the universe, because only a person would have the kind of agency to cooperate or not cooperate, or can be spoken of in this way. And certainly a relationship of love requires persons, two persons at least, to be precise. You need three things for the experience of love to take place: a lover, a beloved, and love itself. So the idea of the universe itself is God, and Krishna will confirm that this is actually true. The universe is a form of the Supreme Person, and later on, and when we get to chapter 11, he will show Arjuna, and by extension us, how this is so. And this is the first thing that Krishna addresses when he divides up these three different categories of jnana, of conceptions of the Supreme in Jnana Yoga. He affirms that he is the sacrifice, the act of sacrifice, the instruments of sacrifice, that which is being sacrificed. So anything having to do with an offering to the Supreme Person, well, Krishna is present in each of these elements. He confirms that he is himself the Vedas and the object of Vedic knowledge, and the sound vibration Om, as indicated as well by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutra, when he indicates that Om, Pranava, is the sound representation or incarnation of Ishvara, the Supreme Person. And in earlier verses, Krishna has confirmed that he himself is the Ishvara of all beings. And finally, Krishna establishes himself as the origin, foundation, and dissolution, which is to say that all three of the guna avatars, Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the maintainer, and Shiva, the destroyer, are all to be found within Krishna. This is not the same thing as saying they're all one. Rather, this is to say that they all find their origin in Krishna, and Krishna is present in each of them the same way he is present in each and every one of us as the Paramatma within the heart, and present within every other element as per the other verses. So not to be confused with the idea that Krishna is denying his own quality as a person, as a unique individual. Remember, in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali describes Ishvara as Purusha Vishesha, that is to say, a person, Purusha, consciousness that is Vishesha, categorically different from all other beings, but nonetheless still defined as a person. So that takes care of last week. We're going to go through this week's verses and then come back and look at each of these verses in greater detail. And if you have any questions or comments at any point along the way, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. So we begin with the 20th verse of the 9th chapter. Krishna says, praying for passage to the realms of heaven, those who know the three Vedas drink soma and are purified of sin. I'll read this again. Praying for passage to the realms of heaven, those who know the three Vedas drink soma and are purified of sin. They offer their worship through sacrificial offerings. Thus they attain the pious world of the Lord of heaven, where they enjoy godly delights. I'll come back and explain about soma in just a moment. The next verse, 21. Having enjoyed the pleasures of the vast heavenly realm, with their pious credits exhausted, they return once again to the world of mortals, thus following the religious principles of the three Vedas in pursuit of material sense pleasure. They attain only such repeated comings and goings. Text 22. For those whose thoughts are directed exclusively toward me, who worship me with complete devotion, I provide what they need and preserve what they have. Text 23. Even those who are devoted to other gods, who worship them with faith, actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, but they do so improperly. Text 24. I am the only enjoyer and the master of all sacrifices, but because they do not know the truth about me, they fall down. Text 25. Worshippers of demigods go to the demigods. Those who are devoted to ancestors will go to such ancestors, and those whose sacrifice is offered to ghosts will go to those ghosts, but my devotees will surely come to me. All right, so those are our verses for this evening. Tessa's question or comment, purify of sin, that sounds like from Christian religion. What does that mean? Yeah, good point. So there is a Sanskrit word, pape bio. There's a few different variations of this that really translates most accurately as sin or sinfulness. So the question really is there a difference between the concept of sin or sinfulness in Vedic yoga, of which Krishna is speaking, and the Judeo-Christian idea of sin, particularly, say, in our case, let's say the Christian conception of sin? There is a difference. And so I think that's a really good thing to be qualified, because that's such a loaded term. As soon as you say sin or sinful, then it conjures up the image that we have of a judgmental God who will send you to hell forever for a thought crime, and is not a particularly generous or merciful person. And the idea of rules and regulations that just take all the fun out of life, and who would want that? Krishna is actually the most playful person. So this is not really the same idea. Here, what we're talking about are actions that are disharmonious with cosmic order. Or, to put it another way, actions that cause harm to others. The first of the yamas, the ethical imperatives of yoga listed in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, is ahimsa, non-violence, being a negating prefix, himsa meaning harming, so not harming. So if one engages in a harmful act, something that brings harm to others, then there's a reaction to that. Harm will come to you. What goes around comes around. That's, in a nutshell, the law of karma. So a sinful action is an action that generates a bad karmic reaction. And in this case, the bad karmic reaction being referred to here are impurities of the mind that disqualify one from going to the heavenly planets or the heavenly realm that Krishna has described here as the destination desired by people who engage in worship of the demigods. Therefore, the sacrifices they engage in are meant to purify their hearts and minds in such a way as to remove any possible disqualification for gaining entry into these heavenly realms. You can think of it as why is it inappropriate to let the Blues Brothers into a fancy French restaurant? They don't really belong there because they don't know how to behave. And they smell bad. Impure. Okay? So the Blues Brothers, before they can go to the restaurant, actually have to take a bath and clean up their act. And I knew you would appreciate this particular analogy, and I think now you know exactly what we mean by this. So the sacrifice is being performed by people who are engaged in following the Vedic rituals for the sake of elevation to higher planetary systems and higher standards, more polished and sophisticated forms of material enjoyment, are basically cleansing themselves of the mentality of the Blues Brothers so that they can go to the French restaurant. Does that answer your question, Tess? We're going to actually get into this in a little more detail right now. So before we go into each verse, you're welcome, let me give you an overview of what's really going on here. What Krishna is speaking about is the yoga of material happiness. That is to say, although yoga in general is a transcendental science, there is a kind of yoga that one can perform in order to raise the level of their material enjoyment. Even in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, we have this idea that you can acquire mystic perfections. You become powerful, gain power over various aspects of material nature to the point where you can control material nature. You can become lighter than the lightest. You can levitate. You can become heavier than the heaviest. You can acquire things from distance that you don't actually have to go there to get them. You can control people's minds. You can gain a lot of power. And the danger, of course, is that you will think, well, now I can use this power for my own enjoyment. So here, Krishna is speaking about a different kind of yoga of sorts, which is the yoga of material happiness, or how to elevate oneself to a position of a higher standard of material enjoyment. So we've spoken earlier about the four principles of material development. And I just want to review this again because it's relevant to the particular section that we're speaking about. So Krishna is going to compare spiritual existence to material existence in the following ways. There are four principles of material development, in Sanskrit known as Purushartha. The first is religiosity, or dharma. So we've defined dharma a variety of ways, and in this sense, we are speaking about material dharma, or that is the observance of religious principles, the kind of stuff that gets you good material credits, acting according to material religious principles, being a good person, basically. And being a pious person, honoring the supreme person, or in this case, demigods, those who are able to give you some benediction of wealth or fame or beauty or all of the above, power, etc. What follows pious material action is economic development, artha in Sanskrit. So, in other words, you get a reward. Be a good person, get a reward. The material world actually works like that. And once you have the means to enjoy your senses, then you go ahead and enjoy your senses. You earn your paycheck and go out and party. And that's called kama, sense enjoyment, like the Kama Sutras. Well, that's 3 out of our 4. And those 3 out of our 4 principles of material existence have 4 problems attached to them, called bhava-vedanam. The first is birth, janma. Now, birth itself is a problem as far as a yogi is concerned, because if one has taken birth in the material world, then something else is going to come along with it. Death, mrityu. Back in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad-gita, we hear Krishna say that death is certain for all who are born, and all who die are certain to take birth again. So this is kind of like a Ferris wheel. You know, you go up, come down, go up, come down. You're born, you die. You're born, and then you die. And as a result, in the 8th chapter, Krishna characterizes all realms of material existence from this earthly planet all the way up to the highest of the heavenly planets as places of repeated birth and death, and therefore places of sorrow, because no matter what you gain, you will lose it. So there you have it. If you take birth, you immediately have a problem, because now that means you are going to die sooner or later. If you die later, then you have the problem of old age, jara. So time takes its toll on a material body, and time, as we mentioned earlier, is also a form of the Supreme Person. It's the one power in the material world no one can stop. Therefore, a manifestation of the Supreme Being. And we will hear in detail about this in the 11th chapter, where Krishna will say, I am time, the great destroyer of worlds, and I come to consume all. Even if you do nothing, all the warriors arrayed in opposition here will be slain. So he's speaking to Arjuna, who's thinking, maybe I don't want to fight this battle. Maybe I should go do something else. Maybe this whole idea of material existence is just a losing proposition. I should go to the forest and blow this battle off. And Krishna is telling Arjuna that that's not going to work. You won't change anything by leaving the battlefield, because everyone has already died by my will. And you can be an instrument, and in this case, that would be the proper dharma for you, or you can abandon the fight, in which case you will not be acting in accordance with your duty, and the whole thing is just going to backfire on you. It's a bad idea. The fourth problem of material existence is disease. Material bodies are prone to, well, disease, and the discomfort that comes with that. This is known as vyadhi in Sanskrit. So as long as you're dealing with material existence, you're dealing with these four problems, and therefore it may occur to you that these first three principles of material existence are really just running in a hamster wheel, and what you really need to do is pursue liberation, or moksha, freedom from this cycle of repeated birth and death. And this too is considered material development because it has a selfish motivation. One seeks by their own effort to be liberated from material existence, freedom from suffering. Earlier in this chapter, Krishna characterizes four different kinds of people who approach him, surrender to him, engage in Ishvara Pranidhana, offering oneself to him. And one who seeks freedom from suffering is counted amongst those, and one who seeks liberation is looking to negate the suffering of the material world in exchange for the happiness of spiritual existence in one form or another. All right. What Krishna is describing in this chapter, and especially in the last verses as we will head into the home stretch of this chapter, is what's beyond the four principles of material development, including beyond liberation, or that which brings liberation automatically, rather than requiring some special effort on our own part. And that is pure devotional service, or bhakti yoga, existence in conscious relationship with Krishna. And that's what Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to move toward, as opposed to the various other kinds of mixed yoga. That is to say, karma yoga mixed with devotion or bhakti, jnana yoga mixed with bhakti, mystic yoga, ashtanga yoga mixed with bhakti. He's urging Arjuna to move in the direction of pure devotional service, not mixed with anything, any other kind of yoga, to say nothing of material existence or material consciousness, which is really not going to help him or anyone else. So with that overview behind us now, let's proceed to look at each of these verses. Okay, so verse 20. Praying for passage to the realms of heaven, those who know the three Vedas and drink soma, who are purified of sin, offer their worship through sacrificial offerings. Thus they attain the pious world of the Lord of heaven, where they enjoy godly delights. So earlier we had a question about the idea of sin, and we have this conception of earning a heavenly reward, which again is very much in the Western religious tradition, the idea that one obeys the rules and gets a reward, goes to heaven. So the three Vedas, the word used to describe those who know the three Vedas is Trividya. The three Vedas being referred to here are the Sama, Yajur, and Rig Veda. And those in the social order of Brahmanas, who study these three Vedas are called Trivedis. In fact, it's a family name for those in the Brahmin caste. You may meet someone named Marvin Trivedi. Well, maybe not Marvin, but you get the idea. I would like to share with you some commentary from Ramanuja of the Sri Sampradaya. He writes that Trividya denotes lower spiritual sciences, known as the Karma Kanda portions of the Vedas, or those parts of the Vedas that describe actions that will bring about a reward, a material reward. And those who perform worship for these rewards are not truly devotees of the Lord because they have desire other than devotion itself. Now, Krishna is being pretty liberal in that he has described that these people, they're his devotees, they're just not pure devotees. Ramanuja is giving them even less line here. They aspire to Svargaloka, the Sanskrit term for the heavenly realm, where there is no old age and disease. I'll come back to this in a second. Soma is a kind of heavenly nectar. It's a plant-based nectar that is both intensely intoxicating, and it bestows expansive life force and extreme pleasure on anyone who drinks it. Now, no one's really been able to find which plant this is that actually produces this nectar. And it's doubtful that this plant, if it was ever on Earth, can be found here anymore. So this particular kind of sacrifice that involves drinking somas, those days are probably gone. But to understand what it is, imagine you're drinking an intoxicating beverage that makes you stronger and more powerful and smarter and is like, gives you this total psychedelic buzz. Okay, well, that's soma. As opposed to the kind of intoxication we have these days, which bends your brain if you take enough of it, depending on which kind of intoxication you're taking. Certainly, drinking alcohol will not make you more powerful and smarter. It may give you the illusion that you're more powerful and smarter, but it actually doesn't work like that, and we know this. So the question comes up sometimes, can you change your karma? I have a friend who's an astrologer, and he basically gets this question all the time. He'll do a reading for someone and explain how the stars are aligned to indicate a particular kind of destiny. And then the first thing people want to know, many people want to know, is, okay, how do I change it? Which is basically like saying, how do I move the stars? Well, you can't really do that. The purpose is to give you an idea of what's coming so that you can prepare to respond properly to your destiny. The Vedic science of sacrifice, however, seems here to indicate that it is actually possible to dispense with karma, to eradicate karma. That is to say, to get rid of latent qualities that will produce a negative result. So if you're purified of reactions to your past sins or psychological tendencies that are themselves not good, then in a way you are changing your karma. You're engineering a new destiny for yourself. And people who know how to do that are not around anymore. You may find someone who knows how to do that. But for our purposes, that's not happening. So one can engage in simple acts of purification by chanting mantras, but the ornate Vedic rituals that will take one to a heavenly planet, nobody really knows how to do that anymore, which is actually very fortunate for us, because that means we simply have to deal with the spiritual science of purification by mantra, which does not yield a material reward, as we will see in just a few moments. So what is misunderstood here by people who are looking to perform such sacrifices and gain such a heavenly reward is that Krishna is actually the one who sanctions these rewards and is ultimately the enjoyer of these sacrifices. They roll up to him, and he's the one who empowers whatever demigod one is worshiping. In this case, the indication is Indra, the god of heaven. Indra acts as a representative who is empowered by the Supreme Person to dispense with whatever benedictions and let people into the heavenly situation they desire. So the interesting thing here is that you may recall just a few minutes ago I mentioned that there's no old age and disease in these places. However, time does run out. After a long duration of time, once the accumulated merit of pious activities has been exhausted, once you've run the table basically on your good karma, then your time of your heavenly sojourn expires and you have to fall back down into the mortal realm of human beings. In other words, birth, death, disease, and old age comes right back to that after you basically use up all of your good karma. Think of it like this. If you're lucky enough to be able to go on a vacation to a beautiful resort, a friend of mine just told me about a place she goes to in Tobago, right near Trinidad, right next door in the Caribbean. And she sent me the link to the website. It's beautiful. She goes there to just sort of recharge, do her own yoga practice, just, chill out. And yeah, it's beautiful. And you can stay there for a while, and you probably won't get old if you're there for a while. And unless something unusual happens, you probably won't die. But eventually you're going to have to leave, because your money will run out. You'll have to come back and earn more money to go on vacation again to this beautiful place. and over and over and over and over again. This is how it goes. So that's what it's like. It's like going to a beautiful resort, having a wonderful time, and then time runs out and you have to come back and go back to your job. It's the same kind of idea. Which brings us to text 21, where we get this in a little more detail. 21, having enjoyed the pleasures of the vast heavenly realm, with their pious credits exhausted, they return once again to the world of mortals. Thus, following the religious principles of the three Vedas in pursuit of material sense pleasure, they attain only such repeated comings and goings. So the word gata agatam, going and coming, indicating birth, death, and rebirth. Basically, the futility of running in the hamster wheel. And that brings us to text 22. For those whose thoughts are directed exclusively to me, who worship me with complete devotion, I provide what they need and preserve what they have. So here Krishna is saying, you can worship the demigods, go on vacation, have a great time, then have to come back, go back to your job, do it all over again. Or you can direct your sacrifices, your meditation, exclusively on me, and I'll take care of things for you. I'll provide whatever you have and whatever you need. I'll maintain whatever you have. And if you need something, I'll provide it for you. You don't have to worry about it. Now, what's interesting in this verse is that we've heard a phrase from this verse in a previous verse, back in chapter 2. But before we go back to the verse in chapter 2, let's chant this verse, number 22. And I'll show you which line it is. So, diacritical marks. As I explained earlier, the bar over a vowel indicates an open sound, an elongated open sound. The accent mark over the S indicates a deep SH sound, as in deep in the back of your mouth, as opposed to a dot under an S, which is a regular SH sound, sh. And the dot over an M indicates closing both your tongue to the soft palate in back and your lips in front. And a Y at the end of a word will run right into the next word, as opposed to being an E sound at the end. So that covers it. I'm going to chant one line at a time. You chant back. Here we go. Ananyaschintayanto mam. Ye jana paryupasate. Tesham nityabhiyuktanam. Yogakshemam vaham yaham. Forgot to mention that a C in transliterated Sanskrit is always pronounced as a CH sound. So hence, chintayanto. So once again, the translation, for those whose thoughts are directed exclusively toward me, who worship me with complete devotion, I provide what they need and preserve what they have. So this last line here, yoga kshemam vaham yaham. So aham means I. And vaham, or vahami, I should say, means to carry, to bring. Kshemam is protection. And yoga, in this case, means requirements, or that which is gained. So here's your translation again. And you'll see the last words. I provide what they need and preserve what they have. So if you were to go back to chapter 2, verse 45, you would see that this same phrase, yogakshema, appears yet again, but in a slightly different context. It's near yoga kshema. So near is a negating prefix. So here, near yoga kshema means to be free from the idea of gain and protection. And the last word is atmavan, which means established in the self. So, to put it another way, one who is established in the self, that is to say, one who is fixed in self-realization, or who is fixed in meditation, samadhi, by virtue of meditating on the Paramatma, the Supreme Person, or one who is acting on the basis of the kind of intelligence that Krishna is speaking about in the Bhagavad-gita. Such a person gives up this idea of being the doer who brings about the rewards of a pious or good karmic material existence. So the verse translates as, the Vedas are primarily concerned with the three qualities of material nature. Transcend these qualities, Arjuna. Establish yourself in pure spiritual consciousness, and thus, situated in transcendence, free yourself from anxieties arising from dualistic conceptions of loss and gain. How do you free yourself from anxieties arising from dualistic conceptions of loss and gain? By being fully devoted to Krishna himself, because by such devotion, he will reciprocate by providing whatever it is you need and preserving whatever it is you have. So there is no need to be in any anxiety about it if one is not pursuing material life for selfish reasons, but rather is pursuing spiritual life in the context of pure devotion. So you may be wondering, well, you know, isn't that kind of selfish too, to just think, all right, well, I'll just stop working and I'll let Krishna take care of me? Not really. And here's why. Krishna actually really loves to do that. The same way a child is not being selfish when they let their parents protect them and provide their needs for them and take care of them. You know, the image comes to mind of a toddler in a bathtub who just wants to splash and play, and or isn't happy about being wet or something. Some of you may have had this experience of wishing your child would just let you take care of them because you're doing it out of love. And this is you're not like burdened by this. This is something that you want to do because it's an expression of love. So same thing. Krishna is not burdened by our letting him take care of us and provide for our needs. He effortlessly creates innumerable universes just by breathing. There's no effort at all. There's no effort involved. He's not like inconvenienced by our acknowledging reality, which is our reliance on him for everything we have anyway. You know, the earth that we walk on, the air that we breathe, every material element, all being supplied by Krishna anyway. He's even happier to provide everything that we need when we acknowledge that out of love, he's providing everything for us. So, no worries. Basically, that's the purport of that. Text number 23. Even those who are devoted to other gods, who worship them with faith, actually worship only me. O son of Kunti, but they do so improperly. So by other gods, this is not meant, this doesn't mean different incarnations of Vishnu. We're talking about demigods or celebrities or politicians. I mean, bringing this into something that's real, that's relatable, because not all of us are really engaged in worshiping demigods or mythological gods. I mean, usually when we think about this in a Western context, demigods are like the Greek gods, the Roman gods, the Norse gods, mythology. And in Hinduism, it's really more of a factor. And of course, from an intellectual standpoint, we generally understand that these are metaphors, symbols of something else other than the thing it literally appears to be. And that brings us right back to where we were last week with jnana yoga. Those who pursue the highest truth through knowledge tend to think this way. Now, in previous classes, I have already made my case for why we ought to give a little more credence to the idea of super powerful aliens living in other dimensions of the universe that we cannot see. After all, we can only see 5% of the universe, if that, and we don't know what's in the other 95%. So to assume that we can dismiss the idea of beings from other dimensions who have access to our dimension that we are not aware of, I think is hubris. Be that as it may, worship of such beings, or on a more mundane level, worship of celebrities, worship of politicians, worship of those who have fame, wealth, beauty, power of some kind. Krishna is saying here, you know, all that comes from me. They're all representatives of me in a way. But even if the ritual is being performed properly from an orthodox standpoint, still it's not proper, because I'm the ultimate source of whatever power, fame, wealth, or beauty the person has that you're worshiping. And confirming in the next verse, I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices, but because they do not know the truth about me, they fall down, which is to say, they fall down into material consciousness and material existence, and therefore end up in the hamster wheel of repeated birth and death and the other problems attendant with material existence. Now, in this last verse, Krishna makes it really clear that the train to Chicago does not go to St. Louis, that every path is not the same. Wherein he says, this is text 25 now, worshippers of demigods go to the demigods. Those who are devoted to ancestors go to such ancestors, and those whose sacrifices offered to ghosts will go to those ghosts, but my devotees will surely come to me. So this is pretty clear. You don't get to the highest destination, that is to say, where Krishna himself is hanging out, by worshiping those who will get you to the heavenly realm. If you are devoted to your ancestors, you go where your mind takes you. For those familiar with Mormon theology, this kind of reminded me of that kind of idea, that not only do you go to heaven, but you go to heaven with your ancestors. Your family will meet you there. And there are other, I think, theologies that embrace this idea of being reunited with family members in the afterlife, in the heavenly realm. Those whose sacrifices offered to ghosts, if you are engaged in that kind of, I'm not sure if it would even be called religiosity, But if you are a medium, someone who is in contact with those who are disembodied spirits, and your mind is focused there, that's where you will go. We go where our minds take us. This question came up recently in my advanced yoga teacher training program. We have a wonderful guest teacher, Michelle Lee, who's teaching us both gross physical and metaphysical anatomy. And the issue came up of Chinese meridians and how medical science cannot confirm the existence of these meridians because when they cut open a cadaver, they can't find them anywhere. And we spoke about this, and from the standpoint of yoga, the reason you won't see subtle energy channels or any other of the koshas, the internal or metaphysical coverings of the Atman, the consciousness, is because the metaphysical body acts as a vehicle for the soul at the time of death to take a person to their next destination. The only thing that remains behind is the food body, the Annamaya kosha, the external physical body, which is the only one we actually see with our material senses or interact with any of our material senses. The metaphysical stuff is all a vehicle that takes the consciousness to their next karmic destination. But someone who is engaged in devotion to Krishna, Krishna assures, upon reaching me, these great souls never again take birth in this transient place of sorrows, for they have attained the highest perfection. That's actually from the previous chapter, 8:15. And that takes us into the home stretch. I want to chant with you this last verse. It's such a nice verse, so we're going to finish up by, oops. Oh, there we go. So we will chant verse 25 together, look once more at the translation, and that will take us to the end of our class this evening. So once again, I chant, you chant back. The dot at the end, under an H, at the end of a word, at the end of a line, means that the vowel will be echoed back. If it's a long vowel, then the echo will still be short. The apostrophe before a word indicates that a vowel got dropped out, and therefore the two words will go together. I'm sorry, I missed a comment a little bit earlier. The Q&A box dropped down a little low. It's pretty hard to be so purely motivated with every intention. Yes, it can be. However, now this is a great point. So I'm glad I picked this up. So thank you very much for this comment. Remember, in one of these verses, Krishna has told us that he carries whatever we are lacking and preserves whatever we have. Where if we're lacking purity of motivation, well, Krishna will provide it upon request. If we think I'm the one who is making spiritual progress by my own effort, then we're under a similar illusion as we would be if we were thinking I'm the one who's bringing about the good karma that's helping me to enjoy my life on a material level. We're not the doers. It's a kind of spiritual egotism that says, I'm the one who's making spiritual advancement by the purity of my intentions. Well, no, actually, it's Krishna who is giving us the spiritual advancement by bestowing upon us the purity that we currently don't have. And when we think about it this way, that I'm coming to spiritual life with so many issues, so many material desires in my way, so many impurities in my consciousness. How will I ever get rid of them myself? Well, I won't. Therefore, what do I lack? I lack purity. Krishna says that he will supply whatever it is I am lacking. Therefore, our appeal in our meditation, sacrifice, worship, whatever word you want to use for it, is for Krishna to please provide us with the purity that we lack. And then once again, we don't have to worry about our impurities. And we'll see more of this issue come up in next week's class. So we're going to talk a lot more about how Krishna looks at a devotee who's making a good faith effort in spite of all of their problems and obstacles and impurities. So thank you very much for your comment, and I apologize for not seeing it a little bit sooner. All right, as promised, we're going to finish up chanting this verse. I chant, and then you chant back. Here we go. Yanti deva vrata devan pitrin yanti pitri vrataha bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti madhyajinopi mam And our translation once again, worshippers of demigods go to the demigods. Those who are devoted to ancestors will go to such ancestors, and those whose sacrifices offered to ghosts will go to those ghosts, but my devotees will surely come to me. And that brings us to the end of our class this evening. We looked at the results of worshiping demigods as opposed to the results of engaging in devotion specifically to Krishna, and we covered how the many different paths of both material pursuit and yogic pursuits provide us with different possible destinations. If you want to go to Chicago, you got to take the train to Chicago. Train to St. Louis doesn't go there. All right. Any last questions? I thank you very much for sticking around for an extra few minutes. We're running over our usual cutoff time. If you have questions after the fact, or if you are listening and watching this class in its recorded versions, please send me your questions and comments. You can find me at Hari@Hari-kirtana.com. I am always anxious to hear from you. Next week, as we continue in Chapter 9, the Yoga of Royal Secrets, we will discuss the simplicity of devotion, and we will hear from Krishna how he sees his devotees. So we will cover verses 26 through 31. And that brings us to the end of our class this evening. I'm very, very grateful that you have all stuck around and listened to Krishna's words with me. And I look forward to seeing you all again, unless there are any last minute questions. Here's your last chance. Okay. Very good. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening or rest of your day, as the case may be. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you very much.